Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar on getting ready for SharePoint 2016. I'm still seeing some attendees who are joining. So, let's give a couple of minutes time and, we'll start the webinar in 2 minutes time from now. Thanks for your patience. Okay, great. We are good to go now. Hello, good afternoon again. My name is Senthil Kumar, and thanks for taking out your time today and joining us for yet another SharePoint webinar series, Getting Ready for SharePoint 2016 webinar. We will be discussing about 2016 preview, migration paths, major improvements, and so on. Just to recollect, we had our earlier webinar in September on migrating your internet to cloud. And I already see some attendees from the first webinar who are part of this webinar as well. That's good to know. Thanks, guys. Okay, we have about 60 minutes to cover this webinar. We will make a presentation in about 45 minutes, and there will be a demo as well. And the rest of the minutes, will be the time to discuss any questions if you have. As a general information, the webinar will be recorded and emailed to all the attendees. Attendees will be muted throughout the webinar. You can use the question box in the control panel to ask any questions. We'll make sure your questions get answered at the end. We'll consolidate all questions and answer them at the end. You can send an email at the email ID displayed if you have any issues with joining the webinar, or you may have any questions before or after the webinar. Okay, before we move into the webinar, a quick intro about Trigent, who we are. We are a Microsoft IT Services Gold Certificate partner, headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts, having other offices across the globe. In business for the last 20 years, a successful business here, generating about 30 million in global revenue, working with a variety of platforms like SharePoint, Office 365, Windows Azure, mobile, Yammer, so on. Worked with 100+ clients, executed 120 projects, have about 80 deployments, have experience close to 200K man-hours of work. With respect to SharePoint, we have a strong pool of 100+ certified SharePoint consultants who work on a variety of SharePoint projects. That's a quick intro. And here are our co-presenters for the day. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Ravish, and it is a pleasure to be presenting at this webinar on SharePoint 2016. I work as a SharePoint architect, and basically I have been working on SharePoint since its very existence. So that's all about me. I'll hand it over to Chela.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to have you all. I'm Chela Palaniappan. I work with the technology team, such as Ravish and others at Trigent, to provide compelling solutions to our clients across both Microsoft, other and other non-Microsoft platforms. I love to run, cook, and do photography when I'm not working. We'll get along. As Senthil said, if there are any questions, go ahead and type them along as we're talking, and we will have some time at the end to answer those questions. And let's look at the agenda for the meeting today. So agenda today, we'll start with introducing SharePoint 2016. We will review the history of SharePoint, a roadmap, and the release timeline. We will look at the significant features of SharePoint 2016 as it relates to users, IT professionals, and developers. We will see some of the benefits of SharePoint 2016 under these categories that are platform management, reliability, performance and scalability, analytics, and cloud experience. We will have a short demo of 2016, and finally, we'll wrap it up with key takeaways from this presentation. Let's look at the evolution of the SharePoint as a platform from a decade ago. If you look at SharePoint, primarily started as a document management system when it started. Then features such as sites, portals, search, BI, and enterprise content management was added. A common management layer was added to provide control and ease of operational tasks. SharePoint also then became a platform on which solutions can be built, providing the extensibility. These three core elements, such as that is experiences, extensibility, and management, was followed in other newer products such as Link, Exchange, and also Office 365 over the several years. SharePoint 2016 is designed as the most secure, scalable, and reliable update so far. Let's look at the release history and roadmap for SharePoint, how it has been over the years. So if you look back at SharePoint's portal server 2001 and 2003, they focused mostly on intranet and collaboration and portals as the name implied. Even during those days, Microsoft provided SharePoint technology as managed services. Starting with March 2007, the focus shifted more towards enterprise features, such as e-discovery, document sets, record centers, so on. These versions of the products were also provided via Microsoft Online Services. For SharePoint 2013, the focus was cloud and enterprise social. The on-premise version of 2013 defined the start of Office 365, the cloud offering from Microsoft. Turning that on its head, the cloud version has now become the definition for SharePoint 2016, which is the Office 365 paved the foundation for SharePoint 2016. Let's look at the SharePoint 2016's vision and the value as it is provided so far. SharePoint 2016 will be focused on delivering value to on-premise customers through the cloud innovation and hybrid deployments. The 2016 will provide improved mobile access to content, people, and applications, along with touch-based experiences across devices and screen sizes. It will make file storage and document collaboration more people-centric. It will enable improved user experience and capabilities derived from innovations in the Office 365. For example, users will be able to quickly discover contextually relevant information and data that is stored across both on-premises and cloud environments powered by Office Graph and Delve. These products are mainly available on the cloud version so far. SharePoint 2016 is the first on-premise server release that brings in all Microsoft's experience running SharePoint at a scale on the cloud in Office 365. SharePoint 2016 will provide a broad array of features and capabilities designed to ensure sensitive information remains protected with investments in data loss prevention, data encryption, and compliance tools that span both on-premises and Office 365 while providing a balance between self-service and content usage that adheres to your corporate policies. Let's look at release timeline. So when is it going to be available, right? So currently, SharePoint 2016 is available in beta for many of our partners and others. The release candidate is expected early 2016, and the general release is expected to be available in spring of 2016. Before we move on, one last relook at the convergence. The SharePoint 2016 is truly built from SharePoint Online and Office 365 version of the product. Many of the Office 365 features that have made way into SharePoint 2016 to deliver the same value to the on-premise customers. Now I'll turn it over to Ravish to take a deep dive into the features and benefits, and lastly followed by a demo.
Thanks, Chala. So we'll start with the benefits and features based on the roles. So first of all, we'll talk about with end user perspective. From end user perspective, SharePoint 2016 will provide improved mobile access to the content, people, and applications, and along with the touch-based experience across devices and screen sizes, what Chala has already talked about in the previous slide. And it will enable improved user experience and capabilities derived from the innovation in Office 365. And there'll be a support for open document format documents. There'll be also support for file name length and other character restrictions that will be removed. New user profile page will be introduced, which will include the content from Delve and Office Graph API using Office Graph API. Updated blogging experience, including drag and drop features for adding images to the posts. So these are the features will be available in SharePoint 2016 with respect to end user perspective. Let's talk about from an IT professional's perspective, and first we'll talk about the patching or updating the SharePoint server. So from an IT professional perspective, patching is entirely different in SharePoint 2016 as opposed to SharePoint 2013. In the past, in SharePoint, an update was actually defined by the number of QFAs, and those were represented in terms of different MSI and MSPs, that is nothing but the Microsoft installers and Microsoft packages. For general SharePoint update in SharePoint 2013, by default, you can expect about 37 MSI and MSPs as part of an update. And then in addition to that, about 18 more on each individual language pack installed on each server. So if you think about number of patches, content in an update, just out of the box, you are going to get 37. As soon as you have language packs, you will get another 18 more. So for each language pack, 18 more, and if there are 10 language packs, so total 180 MSIs and MSPs, in addition to that 37, and that will be let down by default. In SharePoint 2016, Microsoft is doing a number of things regarding to patching to minimize the size of the patch and its footprints. By reducing the number of MSI and MSP down to 2 MSIs and MSPs per patch, in addition to 1 per language pack. So that will come down to from 18 to 1 and from 37 down to 4. So what does that mean from an IT professional perspective? First, patch is smaller, which leads to optimized performance, and second, it executes faster with zero downtime. In Office 365, Microsoft is able to maintain 3.9 SLAs, and in SharePoint 2016 on-premises release, they are going to leverage the same design what they follow for Office 365 or SharePoint Online. So you can install your patches now in the middle of the day, completely transparent to your users, because all of the Microsoft updates will run online. In the past, all updates were running offline, and which requires the constantly starting and stopping the services, and which has resulted into the downtime of your SharePoint farm. But now, since this problem will be eliminated, and hence no longer you will not be required any longer these complex high availability environments in order to just facilitate a patch. Let's talk about in terms of the different role which will be coming up in the SharePoint 2016. So with respect to the IT professionals point of view, min role has been introduced in SharePoint 2016, which is a new feature. And from IT professional perspective, you can configure a server in the farm with a dedicated role. Now first, let's talk about the web front-end server. So web front-end server role will serve the end user requests, and that will be optimized for low latency in order to provide the responsiveness for user request. Then comes the application server role. So application server role is for backend job or the requests triggered by backend jobs by another service. For example, it may be a search service. Services assigned for this role will be actually optimized for high throughput. So the way Microsoft think about these particular role is web front end to optimize for latency, the application server optimized for high throughput. Then comes the specialized load role, or it can be considered as the custom load also. In that, if you want to isolate a server from other services, like for custom third-party applications or custom service applications which you have written for a farm. And then comes the distributed cache role. So those are effectively load balancing end user requests for those various services that actually require cache. For example, social feeds, login, token, cache, modified time, cache. So through these levels of optimization, a SharePoint farm can actually respond quickly to end user requests because SharePoint is intelligent enough to understand how to actually manage the requests end to end. As opposed to in the past, we used to traverse to topology to process the request in case of SharePoint 2013. Let's talk about, with respect to the developers, what is there for developers as far as SharePoint 2016 is concerned. So from developer perspective, SharePoint 2016 will provide the extensibility of app launcher. Also, APIs which were available in SharePoint Online will be available in SharePoint 2016 on-premises release to actually extend and customize the SharePoint 2016 server. Solution packages built can be used in both SharePoint 2016 on-premises version and SharePoint Online version. However, Microsoft is going to end the support of SharePoint Designer for SharePoint 2016. That means developers will no longer be able to use SharePoint Designer in SharePoint 2016 as far as SharePoint Designer 2016 is concerned. However, support for SharePoint Designer 2013 will still be there. But as we know, all these are liable to change since SharePoint is in its beta version, and SharePoint Designer is an integral part of the tool for the development, so it may change also. Let's talk about SharePoint 2016 highlights. So we'll talk highlights in terms of major benefits which has come with respect to management of platform, reliability, performance, scalability, analytics, that includes the insights and data, and then the cloud experience. So first we will take into the consideration that is the management of platform. So let's talk about if you have to manage the SharePoint platform. So hardware requirements. From hardware requirements perspective, it remains 64-bit application, and Microsoft recommends anywhere between 16 to 24 GB of memory for single server installation, or for farm installation anywhere between from 20 to 16 GB. From a processing perspective, compute doesn't necessarily have changed as opposed to what you have seen with SharePoint 2013. So this is almost same. And single quad-core processors should be enough to facilitate you need with SharePoint 2016. On the database side, Microsoft will support 64-bit edition of SQL Server 2014 along with Service Pack 1, or 64-bit edition of SQL Server version next. We have talked about the hardware requirements. Let's talk about with respect to software requirements what SharePoint 2016 will contain, and there are some changes into that. So from a prerequisite perspective, Microsoft has made number of different changes. Microsoft will support Windows Server 2012 R2 and Windows Server 10 with SharePoint 2016. It will require the Windows Management Framework 3.0, which provides support for PowerShell 3.0. It will require .NET Framework 4.5.2 if you are installing on Windows Server 2012 R2. And if you are running on Windows Server 10, it will require .NET Framework 4.5.6. Microsoft will also continue to support Windows Server App Fabric, which provides in-memory distributed caching for number of different features such as caching for social feeds, caching for login token, or last modified time cache. So App Fabric remains the component of SharePoint 2016. Why I'm talking about App Fabric is because back in April this year, Windows Server team announced end of support for App Fabric as of next year. So Microsoft will continue to support with SharePoint 2016. Microsoft do have some new data loss prevention features and information protection controls building into SharePoint 2016. Some of them will be offered through hybrid experience. Hence, it will also require the information protection and control client. And the last WCF data services to enabling the creation and consumption of OData services. That's particularly important when you think about data connectivity scenario by virtue of BCS or new app scenario that requires identity. Let's talk about upgrade and migration scenario as far as SharePoint 2016 is concerned, if you're trying to move from SharePoint 2010 or from SharePoint 2013. So upgrade and migration, so this is an important aspect when a new version of SharePoint is released from Microsoft as far as SharePoint is concerned. From an upgrade perspective, you have ways to upgrade to SharePoint 2016. One is migration to SharePoint 2016 and one is upgrade to 2016. From upgrade perspective, Microsoft will support upgrade from 2013 to 2016. Microsoft also spent some time looking what they call it as N-2 upgrade, which is nothing but an attempt to allow SharePoint customers or users to upgrade directly from SharePoint 2010 to SharePoint 2016. And after Microsoft evaluated that scenario, they felt that the best would be to require SharePoint 2013 as the stepping point for SharePoint 2016. That was due to some substantial changes between the architecture of SharePoint 2010 and architecture of SharePoint 2016. You can think of SharePoint 2013 as the genesis block for future versions of SharePoint. Much like Windows has universal kernel that defines its release, SharePoint 2013, you can consider it as almost the kernel for the future versions of SharePoint. So from an architectural perspective, there is parity between these releases, between SharePoint 2013 and SharePoint 2016. Microsoft has not changed the service application architecture to any extent. So you still have the same shared service architecture you can expect and you have seen in SharePoint 2013. But with respect to SharePoint 2010, it has changed dramatically. So when you are upgrading to SharePoint 2016, any 14.5 mode site collection need to be brought forward to 15 mode. And if you are running the backward compatible site collection in SharePoint 2013, effectively running them in SharePoint 2010 mode, what you have to do is you have to bring those site collections forward to SharePoint 2013 mode before you can upgrade them to SharePoint 2016. Other than that, it's database attach and detach process, which was the traditional way to upgrade and migrate content, will be supported. From the authentication perspective or on identity perspective, Microsoft has made a few minor changes as well. Now SAML authentication becomes the first class citizen in SharePoint 2016. In SharePoint 2013, Microsoft offered multiple authentication providers like Windows, Claims, forms-based authentication, SAML claims, WS-Fed. The reason why my SharePoint 2013 had all these providers because of all about backward compatibility, and SharePoint 2016 will be normalized on OAuth and SAML with WS-Fed. So you can think about SAML authentication as the first-class citizen for authentication in SharePoint 2016. Microsoft chose SAML authentication as the default first-class citizen for SharePoint 2016 because authentication provider, which is that is the SAML authentication, is claims ready, or you can say it's cloud ready. SAML claims based suits the insertion because it enables you to make the cloud more transparent, particularly from an app development perspective and migration perspective. Now question comes, what about Windows identity over SAML claims? A lot of people ask to Microsoft about Windows authentication, since Microsoft is making SAML authentication as the default authentication. But Windows authentication with SAML claims will remain supported as well. So Microsoft is not making any change to Windows identity over SAML claims. So although SharePoint looking forward to SAML claims perspective, Microsoft is going to support some of the older identity. The main idea is to move away from domain-based authentication to cloud-based authentication. So you can think about concept and technologies which is like OAuth or OpenID, which is leading us forward. There will be apps that rely on Windows identity, and SharePoint will still receive, retrieve the Windows identity from SAML for those federated users. Microsoft going to support older authentication model, but they really want to move forward into the world of cloud-based identity. In SharePoint 2013 and in SharePoint 2010, one of the things you always had to do is to leverage port 25 for any communication. But now Microsoft will support star TLS connection encryption. The reason why Microsoft is doing that, if you think about older version of SharePoint, when you are sending email, all of them was unencrypted. And now with SharePoint 2016, now you can run on non-default ports as well, which supports encrypted communication between SharePoint and your messaging services. The great part about it is encryption logic, and you can also leverage the non-default ports other than the port 25 for SMTP communication with SharePoint 2016. So Microsoft has brought forward this as well in the interest of security. There is no fallback, so unless encryption is available, you won't be able to fall back to a non-encrypted connection. The key message is you can now run on non-default port, and you can also configure the same through central administration and or through PowerShell. Now let's talk about in terms of reliability, performance, and scalability. So from performance and reliability perspective, Microsoft has made a number of changes as well. Microsoft is doing a number of things from roles perspective, has implemented a new technology called as MinRole. From MinRole perspective, you can also use PS config through Windows command line or through Windows PowerShell. I mean, many SharePoint customers, what they use Windows PowerShell to programmatically complete the installation. Now they don't have to worry about it. They can leverage the wizard now, even now also, because for them Microsoft has given a new override. So effectively, what those customers or users can do is they can specify a new parameter called each local server role, and then you can specify that what role it can be. From role enforcement and health perspective, SharePoint remains what a server is defined as, what role has been given to that server. So if you have selected web server role, what do Microsoft do to ensure it remains a web server? It will automatically provision some of the service applications needed for web server role. And also Microsoft has built a health analyzer in order to detect any deviation away from what we have defined that role to be. The intent of saying is the moment you are defining a server as a web server role and based on that web server, service applications are created, and the moment if you are creating any extra service application, then the health analyzer will go out of compliance and it will give a message to the administrators. Let's talk about distributed cache in terms of how we can help in terms of reliability, performance, and scalability. So Microsoft has also made changes to distributed cache. Now with the distributed cache, you can actually move up to 4.9 SLAs. The reason is because Microsoft introduced a new feature which actually switches off NTLM authentication between SharePoint and the cache cluster. Instead of it's relying on encryption of cache before transport. Basically, what all of that means is Microsoft do a transformational activity to resolve the NTLM authentication problem that occurred between SharePoint and the cache cluster. That is what caused a lot of downtime with distributed caching. Now that goes away because Microsoft introduced a new feature to resolve that particular issue, and that gets easier in itself. Now you can offer 4.9 SLAs availability from distributed cache perspective, but not only that, in addition, you can also support more connection as well. From upload and download perspective, a new protocol bits has been introduced. In SharePoint 2010, Microsoft introduced a protocol known as Cobalt protocol. The Cobalt protocol is a code name for Microsoft File Synchronization SOAP over HTTP or FSS HTTP. The particular protocol was designed to mitigate latency between a client and a web server. So when a user uploads a document, it will implement the Cobalt protocol. User would request the document from SharePoint. SharePoint would subsequently go to the SQL server to retrieve the document. The document then be presented to end user by virtue of the client or the browser. In SharePoint 2013, Microsoft further evolved the synchronization by introducing threaded storage. Threaded storage then take data from the front end to the back end and mitigated that performance challenge with, which was there with the SharePoint 2013. In SharePoint 2016, Microsoft is moving away from file synchronization from SOAP over HTTP and taking a dependency on more proprietary protocol for upload and download chunking to improve the performance by leveraging this bits. Bits is nothing but the background intelligent transfer service. Now that's going to be new methodology that Microsoft will use to accommodate file upload and download chunking perspective. Microsoft also introduced the fast site creation. You think about the way a site is created today. When you create a site collection for your customers or for your users, many organizations like to programmatically provision those particular site collections either through PowerShell or through a custom interface provided, because an end user generally are not enabled to access central admin or self-service site creation. One of the challenges in SharePoint is site creation is a heavy operation. The reason is because every time when we create a site, there are a number of different things we have to do. One, we have to work through all of the provisioning logic, then all of the features activation, and then that will result into the site collection. Office 365 site collection is fairly rapid and small operation. The reason is what Microsoft does is during a site collection creation, Microsoft copies site collection using site collection copy method at the content database level. So what does that mean? You can think of a base site collection such as the team site template being a template itself within the database. And when a user requests a site for provisioning Microsoft, what Microsoft simply does is it implements a copy command at the database level to move to that template over. So effectively, just adding a new row to the database, bypassing all of the feature activation, because the master copy has all of the implemented already. So that means we have a master copy as a site collection that becomes the foundation for any subsequent site collection creation. So none of the feature activation process occurs as part of the site collection creation process. So you can very rapidly enable fast site creation, and same design will be implemented into the SharePoint 2016. So let's understand min-role provisioning with respect to a demo. Since in our environment we have already installed SharePoint 2016, so we'll be doing the demonstration with the help of screenshots. This is the product and configuration wizard which you run after installation of SharePoint Server, and this is the first screen it comes, wherein it will ask you to it will give you the welcome screen, and you need to click on the next. The moment you click on the next, it will ask you to connect to a server farm. Either you can create a new server farm or you can connect to an existing server farm. Then you click on next button. It will ask you to connect to the backend database server. You need to give the database server name. Then you need to give the user ID and password, which will connect to the backend database. Then you need to provide a passphrase, which will actually add the server to the farm. And then actually it comes the main role screen. This is the new feature which has been introduced in SharePoint 2016. The role of SharePoint was actually defined in the server farm in earlier version by starting and stopping services, or by provisioning service application on a particular server. And if you look at the technique documentation, Microsoft effectively had about 4 different possible roles which SharePoint 2013 can facilitate. And in those 4 roles themselves, we had different requirements with respect to performance. So from the roles perspective, in SharePoint 2013, we have distributed cache role, request management role, and then we had the web server role, and then at last we had the batch processing role. All those roles were just from the guidance perspective, and there were nothing as such like from a code perspective or from an end user perspective wherein you can go and select it. But what Microsoft did here is, as opposed to SharePoint 2013, they actually defined these roles not through the documentation but through the code in the user interface. So now the way Microsoft has done that, they defined effectively 3 discrete roles for SharePoint 2016. One is the user role, and which actually captures the user actions maintained by that role. Then the second role is the robot services role, which effectively process any request not initiated by end user. For example, timer jobs, search index, provisioning. And last is the caching services role, which provides support for distributed cache. So in order to improve performance, reliability, Microsoft is isolating requests to the machine responsible for processing that request, as opposed to allowing that request to traverse the topology. So in case of SharePoint 2013, any request which was coming to the server was traversing through the topology. But in case of SharePoint 2016, using this min role feature, that request will be actually redirected to the that particular server dedicated with that role. Now let's talk about the 5 key boundaries and limits which have been improved. So from content database sizing perspective, we have Microsoft have not identified exactly what the size would be, but Microsoft is likely to support content which will scale in terabytes as opposed to the gigabytes. From site collection per content database perspective, it will be 5 times over what we have in the SharePoint 2013. That means you can now create 100,000 site collections per content database. They are also increasing the list threshold well beyond the 5,000 items as well. And maximum file size, you can now upload 10 gigabytes of file size to SharePoint 2016. So you are no longer restricted to 2 gigabytes. From index item perspective, search indexes 2 times, so you can now index over 500 million items. Again, from reliability, performance, and scalability purpose, let's talk about how user profile is different in SharePoint 2016. So from a user profile perspective, Microsoft is no longer making user profile service into SharePoint. The user profile service actually provides in a way that the only option you have available is to install Active Directory synchronization. For unidirectional import scenarios, Microsoft will leverage Active Directory synchronization as part of the SharePoint 2016, or you would select external replication by virtue of installing some other server like Forefront Identity Manager on a separate machine. So in the past, SharePoint 2013, Microsoft used to build Forefront Identity Manager into the product to enable bidirectional synchronization. But now Microsoft is no longer building it into SharePoint. Microsoft is enabling you to install on a completely separate server, and then you can interoperate with SharePoint. So that improves the reliability of user profile service. From a project server perspective, Microsoft is consolidating project server database into the SharePoint content databases. So that's the substantial change as well. That doesn't mean with SharePoint 2016, Microsoft will give project server for free. You still have to license project server as well. Microsoft has also introduced what they call as durable links. Microsoft is going to make sure that sharing should be a truly frictionless experience. In earlier versions of SharePoint, if you shared a file and renamed the file or moved the file from one site collection to another site collection, then the link was broken. Durable links resolve this issue because it's all about based on the resource ID based URL. So in durable links, system gets a cobalt endpoint for getting file for client. The URL is content, the URL which is content, the site ID and the document ID. So it's all about resource endpoint. So when you upload a file and you would like to share it, it creates a link. That link has resource ID embedded within it that identifies that particular file and has affinity to that file, and that affinity is regardless of that file location has been changed or renamed. And hence, if you share a file to another user and move the file from one site collection to another site collection, the link you provided will still work. Let's talk about in terms of analytics, that is insights and the data, which Microsoft will be working on that. And Microsoft decided to have insights about how users are leveraging SharePoint. So like they are going to have this data, like how frequently do users run into a 404 error when they are accessing a SharePoint site or accessing a document library or a document, how fast are those requests on a general nature, how much latency they are experiencing, which site has greater latency than others. So Microsoft is doing some more telemetry with SharePoint 2016. So this is one of those things which Microsoft is looking at right now. Microsoft has introduced a new enhanced usage database that they use for telemetry. And they have this new API called as SharePoint Logging API or SLAPI. They use SLAPI for to figure out how users are using SharePoint, so they can better provide a better user responsiveness in an environment and the better feature as well. So with the SLAPI, Microsoft will be able to create dashboards and will be able to provide data based on the daily usage, weekly usage by operating system, and also by the browsers. Now let's talk about some of the cloud experiences which Microsoft is going to introduce. So from a compliance perspective, first of all, we'll talk about the classification ID. So Microsoft is doing a number of different things in order to with respect to the compliance. To give you an example, in many cases, many compliance tools, when you try to discover something like a credit card number, it's a simple regular expression. It's a discovering in the format of four digit and then a dash and then again 4 digits and then a dash and then again 4 digits and then again dash and 4 digits. That's a total 16 digits. Classification ID is nothing but an easy way to think about complex query based on one complex predicate. So from a classification ID perspective, we have called as credit card classification ID. And again, it's a complex predicate in that Microsoft look for corroborative evidence as well. So you are looking for actually 4-digit dash, 4-digit dash, 4-digit dash. But in addition to that, Microsoft look for something that corroborating that fact that it may be a credit card number. So they look for something like expression ID. You can think of that it's adding more information to a particular query with e-discovery perspective. There'll be about 51 out-of-the-box classification IDs into the SharePoint 2016. Inside Office 365, you are able to do a number of things like documentation, fingerprinting, item level encryption. So Microsoft thought, why not bring those capabilities back to the their on-premises release through hybrid connectivity. Now, hybrid system enables you to leverage this. That includes on-premises contents and online contents. Let's talk about search. So in SharePoint 2016, search will be available in hybrid format also, or on-premises form also. So in hybrid format, cloud search service application will be shipped inside of SharePoint 2016, which enables you to leverage the power of Office Graph with your on-premises content. So the way this particular scenario works, there will be a service application that will be built natively in SharePoint 2016 that unifies your search index in the cloud and then enables you to search across, retrieving the data blended with on-premises and online content. In addition to that, it brings the power of Delve and the Office Graph. Office Graph is actually a platform, or you can say that it's a framework that that provides the data based on user identity and user activity. It's not something that a user will access in itself. It's a big data set and a framework to help make sure that data available to other applications. Delve is one such application. Indeed, it was first application to be built on Office Graph platform. In other cloud experiences, one of the other changes you can notice is open document format in SharePoint 2016. So you can create new files in document library and save them as open document format by creating an ODF as a template. So you can edit the document of any program of your choice. So that's the new to SharePoint 2016. You can subscribe to cloud capabilities like Azure Active Directory, RMS to leverage per item encryption for SharePoint environment, on-premises as well as SharePoint Online. And this is some of the Microsoft capabilities in cloud maintaining your content on-premises. SharePoint app model will be available in hybrid setup with SharePoint 2016. So let's have some demo with SharePoint 2016. So this is the SharePoint Central Administration site, which has been provisioned post installation of SharePoint, and this is a single server farm installation. First of all, we'll see the service applications perspective, like which all service applications have been deprecated and which are new included. It's opening the service application page. Yeah. We can see here, if I'll click on this new, so you can see the Access Services is now deprecated. The Access Services service application is no more available, but Project Server service application is there. So we have already discussed about in this slide that the Project Server is included in SharePoint 2016 on-premises release. Then you can see this is an app launcher, which is similar to the SharePoint Online, which has come into the SharePoint 2016 on-premises release. In SharePoint Central Administration site, you have the option to configure hybrid environment. So if you want your environment to be hybrid, you can configure it here. You need to give the my site URL, what you have in your SharePoint Online or Office 365, and then you can make use of, like, you can want to make hybrid OneDrive or site, or that option like only OneDrive, that also you can make use of it. Apart from that, if in the service application, as I told in the user profile, that bidirectional synchronization will not be available. Only one directional synchronization will be available. That means you can import the data from Active Directory, but you cannot push the data from back to the Active Directory. These are some of the subsequent changes which have been done into the SharePoint 2016 on-premises. Let's go and check it. Go to this manage servers in this form, this link. Here you can see there are two more columns added as opposed to in SharePoint 2013. We have the role column and we have the in compliance column. So the role column signifies what role you have assigned to this particular server when you were provisioning this SharePoint installation. And in compliance, it says that if you have assigned a particular role to that server is in compliance to that role or not. What does that mean is, if you have make it as a web server role, so for web server role, some of the default service applications will be created. In that service application, service applications will be created, and if some of the service applications you go ahead and create, then it will go out of compliance. So in order to bring back to the compliance, you have this fix button. As soon as you will click on this fix button, automatically this will come back into the compliance. Let us have a look at the some of the new site collection templates have been created. Have been added into this. So I will just show which all new templates have been added. So if I go to this enterprise tab, I can see that there is an in place hold policy center. This is the new template have been added. And then we have compliance policy center. This is the new one added. If I'll go to the publishing tab, the product catalog site template is no more available. These are the changes with respect to the site collection templates. Let's go and check the SharePoint team site. So this is the SharePoint team site, and in this you can see that we have the app launcher same as the SharePoint Online. If I'll go to a document library, you can see that it has the control panel over here, which is same as the SharePoint Online. And these are some of the features which have been brought forward in the SharePoint 2016 on-premises release. So that's all from the demo side, and we'll talk about the key takeaways. So SharePoint Server 2016 can be considered as a comprehensive solution for connected information working platform, and it will be useful and very helpful the way people work. It will optimize the way people work. It will also preserve the structured process, compliance what you define for environment, and it is easily integrated manageable platform. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
Okay, that was wonderful. So this is what we wanted to go through today. We have close to say about 9 minutes left, and so it's time for questions. As Ravish was talking, we had some questions from different attendees. We'll go them one by one. But if you have any more fresh questions, please feel free to use the question pane and submit those questions. We'll make sure those questions get answered. But here's the first question. Okay. Any idea on the technology SharePoint 2016 is used for rendering the analytics data?
Actually, we have already talked about it in one of the slides. Microsoft uses SLAPI API and the usage database for analytical data.
Yeah. I think we spoke about SLAPI API, right? Okay. Here's the next question. What are the deprecated features in SharePoint 2016?
As far as SharePoint 2016 on-premises release is concerned, there'll be no standalone installation supported, which requires SQL Express. So if you want to run, you have to have a SQL Server installed even in the single server farm. And there are no plans to release SharePoint 2016 Foundation version, and Forefront Identity Manager is no longer included. in SharePoint 2016 product, which was required to sync user profile attributes with Active Directory. And the one more thing is like SharePoint Designer will also not be shipped with SharePoint 2016. However, SharePoint Designer 2013 will be supported.
Okay. And here's another question. Okay. Will SharePoint 2016 support SharePoint 2010 workflow engine?
I would assume that workflow manager based workflows like SharePoint 2013 workflows would be supported, and then like SharePoint 2010 workflow engine should also be supported in SharePoint 2016.
Okay. Here's one more. Okay, what is the difference between ODF and Open XML formats?
Convincing customer they have the better technology is the weapon of choice when it comes to winning business battles in high tech. So that's the first thing we'll have to make it clear. So at the highest level, like ODF, that is nothing but the open document format, which comes from the IBM, versus Open XML, which is from the Microsoft, and each of which views itself as threatened by the other. So both are to view the documents and provided by the two different companies.
Okay, so here's a question which just came in. Are there any discontinued features from SharePoint 2013?
I think we have already answered this question. Yes, there are a few features which is deprecated in SharePoint 2013. I mean SharePoint 2016. That is, for example, no standalone installation will be supported.
Okay, this is for 2016, right? Okay. Okay.
Also, there are a few other things that I think Excel services are not going to be supported, and a few other additional stuff. Right, Ravish?
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, we have one more. Right? So this is SharePoint experience. Okay, we have a lot of customization in SharePoint 2013. Would it be a seamless upgrade to SharePoint 2016?
From upgrade perspective, upgrade has never been a problem, even if you have done a lot of customization. The only point should be taken care of that you follow the Microsoft recommended approach to upgrade, and you will be fine with your application, or you'll be fine with your farm.
Okay, we got two more. Okay. We are considering implementing an internet solution using SharePoint 2013. Would it be better to wait for the SharePoint 2016 version release instead?
Yeah, why not? I mean, you can leverage a hybrid environment and features from cloud, which will be included in SharePoint 2016 release, and some of the new cool features will be available that also you can leverage and make use of in your application.
So the key is also the timeline. The timeline as of now, Microsoft hasn't given a definite date, but it is expected in spring of 2016, which is almost about 5 months away. So considering that, it all depends whether your business could wait for another 5 months to even to get the product installed and then get going and have a product ready. Or alternatively, you could build this on 2013 and migrate to 2016 when it becomes available.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, here's another one. Is PPS supported in SharePoint 2016, and what are the various ways BI can be implemented in SharePoint 2016?
If I'm not wrong, PPS is Performance Point Service, and yes, Performance Point service will be supported in SharePoint 2016. And as far as implementation is concerned, it will remain same as what we have in SharePoint 2013, so there will be no change at all.
Okay. Yeah, and I think there's one more. I think this is with respect to licensing. How will licensing work with Office 365, even if users just want to use the SharePoint 2016 on-premise features?
Separate licensing will be required for both Office 365 and SharePoint 2016 on-premises version. So if you do not want a hybrid environment and if you don't need to, then in that case you don't need to procure Office 365 license. You just need SharePoint 2016 server license. But if you want to use hybrid environment, that in that case you'll have to procure the licenses separately, both for Office 365 and SharePoint Server 2016.
Okay, great. So I don't see any further questions, but I think we should just break up for a few seconds, just to check if there are any more fresh questions which are coming in. We can just wait for another 30 seconds or something like that, before we break up finally. For any new questions. Okay, I don't think we have any more new questions. But even if you have some, after this webinar, you can reach out to us at the email ID mentioned in the presentation. We are also actually out of time. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks for your questions. Again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have further questions. We are happy to go into much more detail if that would be helpful. So thank you very much again. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.